Indeed, an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you this afternoon and spend a few minutes. I'm going to focus on a particular initiative, but it was really encouraging to hear in this conversation today and last night at dinner the focus and the commitment to the collaboration between the public sector and the private sector in dealing with this very serious challenge that we have around cybersecurity. If I leave nothing else with you today at the end of my few moments of comments, let it be this: that this cybersecurity challenge is a serious threat to our national and economic security. That the threats are real, that the vulnerabilities are extensive, and the consequences could be dire if we don't come together, raise the awareness, and raise our collaborative effort to address this challenge. So for today, there's three things that I feel are necessary in how we approach this challenge. I'm going to focus on one of them today. And it is an effort to have a joint integrated operational capability around this topic of cyber, to enhance our ability to prevent, detect, mitigate, building greater situational awareness and a common operating view of the cyber domain. So one of the projects that I specifically want to talk about in the US, and this has international implications which I'll talk about, but at the end of 2008, the President's Instack, which was mentioned earlier, received a request from the White House to take a look at the need for, feasibility of, and impediments to this concept of a joint integrated public-private operational capability around cybersecurity. We went through a very extensive scoping effort. I met personally with representatives from the Department of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, and a number of groups within the US government. And unanimously, the agreement was this capability was an absolutely essential one. We went through a process and in May of 2009, delivered a report to the President of the United States that recommended the establishment of such a capability. Juniper's CEO had the chance to brief President Obama personally on this particular recommendation. So what then? So this I use as a graphic, and not to confuse you, but just to show, and what I want to illustrate here is that the initiative of the private sector leadership, the President's Instack is made up of 28 CEOs of major corporations in 4 sectors: IT, communications, financial services, and the defense industrial base. In 180 days, we went through a process from concept of idea to actually executing on a pilot program. These were some of the steps along the way, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of each of them to show you the benefit, the power of collaboration and what we can accomplish together, and why this is relevant in this forum today and in forums around the world. And I did intend to say at the beginning of this, congratulations to the organizers of this symposium. This is such a timely topic. This is such a timely topic, and to organize this group with the influential people that are here in this audience is just terrific, and I congratulate the organizers for that, and I'm very proud to be a part of it with you here today. So again, this just graphically illustrates some of what's going on. Now, why is this important? And again, listening to the discussions here about national strategies. In the US, we have a national strategy around cybersecurity. We are building a national cyber incident response plan that tries to define roles and responsibilities in the event that an incident escalates to a threshold of national consequence. There are a lot of things going on. We're at a time in history. We need to seize this moment at a time in history to address a very dangerous threat to our national and economic security. I'm going to go through some of these fairly quickly just to give you an idea. So as we move beyond the report to the President, industry decided, you know what? Government doesn't always move very fast, at least in the United States. I'm sure that's not true here in the Netherlands. But we decided that maybe we should take a look at the way industry works together. Maybe we should have a better understanding of how we share information across sectors. And given the fact that in the Instack there are 4 sectors that I mentioned earlier, it seemed like a good test bed for taking a look at how we work together. We also have sector operational organizations that we call ISACs. In Washington, you have to have acronyms for everything. So that stands for Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and I think you do some of that here in this country as well. So we took those 4 sectors and we began to look at how we would put such a program together. We needed to decide what information is relevant. Because for those of you that are in this business, you know that we fight and repel thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of exploit attempts on a daily and weekly basis. Our networks are resilient. They're not impenetrable, but they are resilient. We withstand and repel those kind of attacks. My company, we do it internally and on behalf of our customers, and we do it fairly successfully every day. So when we talk about what kind of information we need to share, we started to break that down. And so we built this matrix around issues of status change, abnormalities, and impacts, and in how it would affect situational awareness, indications and warnings, and the actual operational posture. What this attempts to do is separate from the daily noise that we get in the attacks and various attacks that we have every day, and has been instrumental in driving how we approach this particular topic. We then wanted to look at how we deal with this from a legal standpoint, and this was one of the stages. I'm going to move through. Whoops, I moved in the wrong direction. All right. One of the greatest successes we had in this effort was we actually were able to develop a legal document, a memorandum of agreement, that 4 sectors and 19 companies were willing to sign. Now that may not seem like a big deal to you, but at least where I come from, that's a heck of a deal, because getting the lawyers to agree on just about anything is an enormous challenge, and so we consider this to be highly successful, but we did it. Once doing that, we decided to build a concept of operations. How will this work? We did a lot of research around technology. We agreed on utilization of a relational database that we called an information sharing repository that would allow us to accept submissions from each of those sectors around that information you saw in that previous matrix. We had 2 cross-sector analysts that would do the correlation to identify patterns and trends of activities that would be relevant. So we built the ConOps using the information sharing repository. Analysts in this business would be authorized to submit, read, and access that information. 2-factor authentication for those credentialed analysts to be able to do that. We did a full-day tabletop exercise, bringing in operational subject matter experts to test the ConOps for its validity, and then we decided to proceed. We then moved to build a set of standard operating procedures and to execute a pilot program. These 19 companies and these 4 sectors decided to make the necessary resource investment to build this capability and then to enter into this pilot program. So this, again, goes through some of the steps that I've mentioned through here, and it would be overseen by a management coordination group, representation from each of those 4 sector operational organizations to be able to determine the success or failure. Now that's really important. We built in advance a set of measures of success. How would we know at the end of this process, are we actually improving detection, prevention, mitigation, and response, and the metrics to go along with that, so we could evaluate trust, how we were building trust. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, this is all about managing risk. You can't protect everything all the time. And in cyberspace, it's important to be able to know where to place your bets in managing that risk. So we launched a pilot program last April, and the idea was to be able to test this capability of learning from one another in delivering real-time, reliable or near real-time, reliable and actionable information to improve detection, prevention, mitigation, and response through enhanced situational awareness and a common operating view of the cyber domain. These are the sector operational organizations that participated, and I will tell you that the beginning of this process was a little rough. Getting the traction, creating the trust, having people understand, because what we learned when we looked at how we work together is we did a pretty good job in the individual verticals. So in financial services, there was a pretty good program of how folks in that community shared. In the defense industrial base, the systems integrator community, pretty good program. But what we learned was not much cross-sector work was taking place. So the notion here is a paradigm shift. This whole notion that we're dealing with as it relates to cyber, we talked about this a little bit last night. It's my view that the entire paradigm needs to change. We've lived in a world of need to know, and we need to operate now in a world of need to share. And I understand that there's certain elements of that need to be protected due to classification and so forth. But I believe there's an opportunity to share a whole lot more than what we do today to our mutual benefit. This is kind of what it looked like, just from a practical standpoint. These are the 4 sectors. The center is the information sharing repository. We call it a joint coordination center. And again, remember, this phase of this is private sector to private sector. No government involvement in this phase. Okay? So this is how it works. The information comes in. I have another slide later that shows you in a little more detail as to how this process works. This was really key. We maintained originator control of all sector submissions. Now those submissions might be information about IP addresses that were a problem, or malicious malware that had been detected, or anomalous behavior on the network, and signatures. This was information that would be candidates for sector submissions. All originator controlled, all anonymized. No customer data, no attribution to a particular company. It went through these sector operational organizations where it got its first filter to meet the test of the matrix that I showed you earlier for relevance in the big picture, and then submitted. But it was sensitized based on a color-coded system. We call it a traffic light protocol, so that as you see here, in some cases with red, only the people that were credential token holders would be able to see that. Now we built into the process a tear line capability so that we could take that red version down to a yellow or green so it could be shared across the constituent community. Now the number of companies represented by these 4 sectors in this pilot was about 4,500 companies. So they would be the beneficiaries of the cross-sector advisories that would come out of this product. This is the other graphic that I wanted to show you about the flow, how it would come in from a particular company through their ISAC, then through the cross-sector analysts, as you see at the top, and the whole process overseen by a management coordination group, as you see here. We had trend reports that showed port metrics, malware counts, consolidated threat signature file were part of the information that the cross-sector analysts updated to share with the constituents each week. The cross-sector analysts, along with each of the sector analysts, met weekly on a conference call or as needed if an event would occur that would escalate to one of potential national consequence. Fortunately, that didn't happen during this pilot program. We also used a survey process to be able to track the success and the building of the trust. And I've shared a couple slides in here that I'll show you in a minute. This is kind of busy for you. What I want to focus on is down in the left-hand corner shows you the measures of success. Did we deliver actionable value-added information through this process? Was that received from the cross-sector collaboration capability, which allowed and enabled action to be taken sooner rather than if this capability did not exist? Did we achieve a common operating picture? And then did the cross-sector collaboration and analysis increase through the context of this particular pilot program? Now, why this is really important and why I think this is potentially game-changing. The report I mentioned to you earlier that we delivered to the President of the United States in May of 2009 suggested a multi-phase process. This is just the early piece of this, and this is just private sector. But eventually it is to be built out to include all 18 critical infrastructure sectors, to include state and local governments, and to include our international partners. So that we truly take this to a level at all of the cyber centers in the government. And I'll talk about that in just a moment because that obviously presents a few additional challenges, but nothing that can't be dealt with. In that 6-month period, we ended up, at the end of it, 270 sector submissions over the course of that period of time. This answers the question, did you receive information of value? And you can see the darker blue line responds to that information. So I think by most measures, this would be considered successful. This gives you just a flavor of the total submissions by sector. And this asks a question, as a result of the analyst collaboration in this pilot program, how often were new, actionable, value-added cyber threats, vulnerabilities, or incidents discovered? And as you can see in this graphic here, over 80% of the folks involved in this said that it was either often or seldom. So this shows a reflection that what we actually produced added value to the process of the work that goes on on a day-to-day basis. This is a view from the portal of the common operating picture, showing the types of submissions, the severity of submissions, and how we base our risk judgments on this. This just shows you the trust as it grew over the execution of this. And this is people that had never done this before, so this was a brand new exercise. So building trust was really important At the end of this process, our survey showed that we got close to an 80% trust factor. This just shows that same thing in a little different way. All right, so the key part of this is we executed a pilot program which no one knew for sure whether we could actually demonstrate value. We had empirical evidence of the fact that during the course of this pilot, incidents, vulnerabilities, or threats identified in one sector coming through this process of distribution cross-sectorally help companies and organizations in other sectors identify vulnerabilities they didn't even know they had. Didn't even know they had. So the exchange in the value proposition was proved out in this small test bed in this 6-month period of time. So what next? So during the course of this process, I briefed the White House, I briefed the Department of Defense, I briefed members of Congress that had oversight responsibility, and I continued to stay in touch with the Department of Homeland Security on these matters. At the end of this, the government then came to us in industry, those of us in the private sector. By the way, CSC was a key partner with this, John. I meant to mention that earlier, just to give testimony. But the government came to us and said, okay, we think now we're ready to move with you to the next step of integrating this capability. Why is that important? So even in this discussion we heard earlier today in the presentations that we heard, the government owns a very important asset in this process. It's called intelligence. Okay, the threat intelligence information that the government owns is critical. We don't, in the industry side, we don't care so much about sources, but we do care about targets, techniques, and procedures. So as we look to manage risk in our own environments, for our own operations and for our customers, having an enhanced access to threat intelligence helps us increase our ability to manage risk. Key piece of this. So the government owns that. What does industry own? We know about vulnerabilities, we know about malicious behavior, we know about anomalous network activity, and if you combine that, that becomes a powerful ally in terms of the ability to fight this fight and raise the bar against the adversary. Whether they're a criminal element, whether they're nation states, or whoever they are that's trying to disrupt or even disrupt in this process. So the government came to us and we said, okay, let's take a look at how we will do this to be able to protect information coming from industry, build that trust, and be able to execute on the vision of ultimately a joint coordination center that is truly joint integrated in public and private. So on January 26th of this year, we began a second 6-month phase to begin that process. We were able to, once again, execute on a legal document that set forth the parameters of how we would share that information. Is it me? How we would share that information and be able to take the steps to exchange what we built out of the pilot with threat indicators coming from the government. That will expire sometime at the end of July, that 6-month period, and we've already stood up a planning team to look at the long-term sustainability model for this capability to include additional operational groups, more critical infrastructure sectors, more elements of the government. So what we're really proud about and excited about in this initiative is that we've taken and seized upon an opportunity to prove out a capability that's never been done before. This type of activity, there's a lot of talk. People talk about information sharing. If you ask people to define what they mean by that, you'll get all kinds of different answers. We've actually defined the information. We've defined a capability. We've built a concept of operations and a set of standard operating procedures. We're using technology to try and be as real-time as we can and reliable and actionable in the information that we share. We put out 20-some cross-sector advisories with either alerts and warnings, identifiers, or even recommended protective measures. So we are now moving to the next step in this, and we're very excited about this opportunity. From what I've heard since last night and during the conversations, both collectively and individually today, it sounds like you are moving in this country in this similar type of direction. So we need to exchange lessons learned with one another, and we need to build on these capabilities, and we need to prove. You know, there's many people that are not convinced that industry and government can work together in this kind of environment for a common mission. I'm absolutely convinced not only can we do it, we must do it. The threat is significant enough that unless we accept this as a shared responsibility, we break down the barriers that have existed in the past, and we come together to share, analyze, and collaborate in a manner unlike we've never seen before, then we may be overtaken by this threat. It's actually imperative. Our national and economic security depend on it, and our citizens are counting on us getting it right. Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to any questions you might have.
Okay, folks, thank you.